John F. Kennedy is an emblem of revisionism, beloved in all our hearts as the young, handsome, charismatic, patriotic figure of the world's most beloved family from the 1960s, and most importantly, the President of the United States. This figure, of course, was callously killed by the polarizing Lee Harvey Oswald. Revisionism holds effect in this case, especially as it takes going out of one's way to find a blemish in Kennedy's past. Kennedy cheated on his wife, some of the time with the famous Marilyn Monroe, but had possibly the most famous family ties to ever roam the White House. Kennedy delved in narcotics and had moblings, but is remembered as slightly below Lincoln as the best leader in U.S. history, according to a recent study done by The Independent. Kennedy's campaign could be compared to Obama's in 2008. It was a resurgence of showing America we can do what we are trying to achieve. It was the air about him that maintained posthumously that can be considered a patchy job of revisionism. Says Robert Dallek, one of the few ever granted permission to view JFK's medical records. When I read about the hospitalizations, my eyes widened. And in his biography of John F. Kennedy, steroids for his Addison's disease, painkillers for his back, antispasmodics for his colitis, antibiotics for urinary tract infections, antihistamines for allergies, and on at least one occasion, an antipsychotic, though only for 2 days, for a severe mood change that Jackie Kennedy believed had been brought on by antihistamines. With a close look, these illnesses seem to have been falsified. John F. Kennedy was a painkiller addict, something retired NFL players are smeared for regularly by the media, but this is not the case with John F. Kennedy. Narcotics are some of the worst drugs one can get into, but Kennedy's charisma and good looks worked as a drug for the American people. This is not to say Kennedy was a poor president, as he had some of the best foreign policy to ever be dealt from the president's palace. This is to say Kennedy isn't the golden child reminisced upon in modern times. In conversation with the president's wife, Jackie Kennedy, Marilyn Monroe admitted to an affair with JFK with intention to become his next wife. This was found in a phone call recovered by Christopher Anderson for his book, These Few Precious Days, The Final Year of with Jackie. As if it was poor form of her to stand up for herself, she made it known on the record she turned a blind eye to the rest of the affairs, but the line was drawn with Marilyn Monroe. "Marilyn, you'll marry Jack. That's great," Jackie responded, according to accounts done by Peter Lawford in the New York Times. "And you'll move into the White House and you'll assume the responsibilities of First Lady, and I'll move out and you'll have all the problems." The future of Jack and Jackie could never be written, as both Marilyn Monroe and JFK would die prematurely. Jackie seemed to be on the edge of terminating the relationship, but their pairing is remembered as one of the most intimate to grace the White House. On more of a policy-related note, John F. Kennedy is remembered as a liberal president. This is because of his ties to the civil rights movement, his family's more liberal ties, and his Democratic Party. In reality, JFK was more of a conservative-minded president, making moves always with perspective on what will get him re-elected in the 1964 election that he wouldn't live to see. Kennedy's civil rights movements were slightly overrated, as civil rights leaders of the time can recount that he was cautiously thwarting their ideas at almost every turn. Frank Sinatra's daughter remembered a time Kennedy rejected a couple for very basically being an interracial couple. The Kennedys had a very specific way of thinking and doing things, and at one point, Dad's friendship with Sammy Davis Jr., who was soon to marry Mae Britt, became a political rub for them. She was a beautiful white blonde actress, and they didn't like the idea of interracial marriage. This is the Kennedys. You would have thought the reverse of them. Dad got a phone call and he was asked to disinvite Sammy Davis to the inaugural gala, and he actually had to do it. Washington Post reporter Will Haygood recalled in February 1963, Kennedy invited 800 blacks to the White House to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. Louise Martin, a Democratic operative who helped plan the function, had placed the names of entertainer Sammy Davis Jr. and his wife, Mae Britt, on the guest list. The White House scratched it off and Martin would put it back on. According to Martin, Kennedy was aghast when he saw the black and white couple stroll into the White House. His face reddened and he instructed photographers that no pictures of the interracial couple would be taken. In 1963, Kennedy penned a vision for civil rights that would go on to be his equality legacy. He publicly demanded for Congress to essentially ease the pressure on minorities and calling for an end to public segregation. This led to the idea that Kennedy was an incredibly liberal-minded president, and while he was somewhat so for the time, this is not completely true. John F. Kennedy's murder was obviously a monumental event in the history of the world. When this is the case with events, oftentimes they are eternally researched, and that leads to new information. There's come to be several pieces of information implicated the CIA as people wanting JFK dead and covering certain things up. The head of the CIA at the time, John McCone, intentionally held back information about the death of John F. Kennedy, and later this was even confirmed by the CIA. Chief Justice Earl Warren described McCone's reports as complicit and incendiary. This put him on the edge of perjury because he was denying possible facets of the story that are being rejected. Now, it would be a fallacy to assume that just because the information isn't there, that there's something the CIA is holding back that would be an absolute game changer. This isn't proving anything new, but rather changes everything because it shows light upon theories. The CIA wants the people to think Oswald acted as a lone wolf. This essentially opens the door for any hellfire conspiracies that could be brought upon. This next section is less fact-based and more conspiracy-based and needs to be taken with a grain of salt. One of the most popular theories is that of the Umbrella Man, a close bystander to JFK at the time of his murder. The Umbrella Man, of course, has an umbrella, and even though it was not and had not been raining at the time of the shooting, Assassination researcher Richard Cutler suggests the possibility of an umbrella that shoots paralyzing darts, making JFK a sitting duck for shooting. This was given momentum as CIA weapons developer Charles Sensini told the Senate Intelligence Agency that such an umbrella weapon was in the hands of the CIA in 1963. Several theories depict the Secret Service, the CIA, and the FBI, and the Cubans were involved. These theories seem to make a lot of sense at first read, but holes can always be poked, as is often the case with conspiracies. From a fuzzy, covered-up, barely filmed watershed event, there is obviously going to be difference of opinion on the story, as time passes more and more information is released and revised.